Hi everyone, welcome back to Julia's story. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. People like to say big moments announce themselves with trumpets. Mine arrived with the hiss of an espresso machine and the scrape of a mop across tile. It was a Tuesday, the slow kind that makes the clock feel stubborn. The cafe smelled like burnt sugar and old cinnamon. I was on my second shift, hair pinned up, sleeves rolled, trying to stretch my smile far enough to get through the dinner crowd. Then the bell over the door chimed and the room tilted a little. Ethan Hale walked in like he owned the air. Clean navy suit, pale shirt, tie that whispered old money. I knew who he was. Everyone did. My boss lifted his head from the register, mouthed his name, and started polishing the same glass over and over. The couple by the window stopped mid-conversation. Even the coffee foam seemed to stand at attention. I kept moving because that is what you do when the world arrives in your doorway. You keep moving. He looked at me the way he had the first time we met, a few weeks earlier, when he came in with 2 assistants and a phone pressed to his ear. Back then he was all edges. Busy, brisk, eyes on numbers I would never see. He ordered black coffee with a hint of honey, paid with a card that made the machine blink, and left me a tip big enough to make me check if there had been a mistake. Tonight he waited until I wiped down the counter. He put both hands on the wood like it was a negotiation table and gave me a smile that felt like a key sliding into a lock. "Hi," he said, as if we were just 2 people and not a headline waiting to happen. "Can we talk somewhere quieter?" My boss heard that and decided the stockroom needed his full attention. The couple by the window found their phones very interesting. I nodded and led Ethan to the narrow hallway by the back door, past the calendar with last year's dates and the pegboard with dented pans. The light back there always flickered like it was nervous. It made his face look a shade softer. He did not waste words. Men like him measure time in money and attention. "Raya," he said, saying my name like he had practiced it. "I do not want to make this dramatic. I do not want to make you uncomfortable. I just want to be precise." I folded my rag, forced my hands to be still. "You have 2 assistants who could teach a class in precision." He almost laughed. "Almost. I have been accused of worse." He took a breath, the kind you take when you are about to jump. "I want to marry you." The hallway shrank. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. The words were simple, but they did not fit the place we stood. The leaking sink. The scent of bleach. The hum of the refrigerator like a tired heart. I stared at him and felt heat climb my neck. "You do not even know me," I said. "I know enough," he said, steady. "I know you work 2 jobs. I know you help your neighbor carry her groceries. I know you bring your own tea bags to save the cafe money and pretend they belong to the house. I know you do not let me buy you things. I know that when you look at me, you do not see a vault you would like to climb inside. I know that when I am in a room with you, the noise drops. I am a man who lives in noise. I notice quiet." The mop slid against my ankle. I pressed it back with my heel. "A proposal is not a rescue," I said. "I do not need saving." "I am not trying to save you," he said. His voice softened, and in it I heard something I did not expect. Weariness. "I am trying to choose you." The cafe at our backs kept moving. Someone laughed. Someone coughed. Somewhere, a spoon hit a saucer with a small bright bell. If he had fallen to one knee, if a ring had appeared, if a violin had started up out of nowhere, maybe I could have blamed magic. Instead, there was only him and me and a fluorescent light that buzzed like a mosquito. "I could give you a life where rent is an old memory," he said quietly. "I could give you safety. I could give you time." The words were not a trap, but they were heavy. I thought about the envelope under my mattress with cash that never seemed to grow. I thought about the landlord's knocked knuckles, firm but polite, the way he said my name like it should not be on his paperwork. I thought about the way the bus sighed when it pulled up, exhausted as the people inside it. Time. The one thing I never had, and the one thing he bought in bulk. There was a small white scar near his wrist. You only see scars when you are close. I could smell his cologne, clean and expensive, something that did not say its own name out loud. He was looking at me like I was a door he hoped would open. I did not move for a long beat. I let my heart race, and then I told it to slow down. I swallowed and heard my own voice before I knew what it would say. No. The light flickered again. He did not flinch. He did not do the thing powerful men do when they are denied, which is make the room ashamed. He only stood very still, like someone trying not to scare a feral animal. His eyes changed in a way that made my stomach hurt. Tell me why, he said. Because your world eats girls like me. Because I have watched what happens to people who take rich love with both hands and wake up holding terms and conditions. Because the last time a man said he could fix my life, I spent 6 months fixing the damage instead. Because I want to know who I am when the lights are off and there is no one to clap. I did not say all that. Some truths sound dramatic when you are standing next to a bucket. I kept my voice even. I do not trust the things your life would ask of me, I said. I do not trust the rooms you live in. I do not trust the power that follows you around like a pet. I do not want to learn the rules of a game that was never built for me to win. His jaw flexed once. He nodded. It was not agreement. It was respect, or something close to it. He slid one hand into his pocket and drew out a small black box. Not velvet. Leather. Simple. He set it on the shelf by the extra paper cups and pushed it toward me. It is not a bribe, he said. It is a promise. If you change your mind, if fear is the only thing between us, open it. If you never open it, that is your answer. I did not touch it. The box sat there like a heartbeat. My name carried across the cafe in my boss's voice. A new table needed menus. Dishes needed drying. The life I knew tugged at my sleeve. I am sorry, I said, and I meant it. I cannot be what you want me to be. He studied me the way you study a map. Then he did something kind. He stepped back. He did not chase. He did not argue. He lifted his chin a fraction, as if to acknowledge a fight had been offered and declined. Understood, he said. Thank you for being clear. He walked out through the smell of sugar and steam, past the couple that could not stop staring, past the door that chimed in a voice too cheerful for what had just happened. Outside, rain started to lay a soft gray veil over the street. His driver opened the car. He paused once on the curb and looked back through the glass. Our eyes met across traffic and neon and the reflection of my own small life. Then he got in and was gone. I stood in the hallway with the mop handle under my palm and the box on the shelf, and a feeling in my chest that did not have a name yet. My boss called again, and I answered because that is what you do when you still have a job. I moved plates. I wiped tables. I smiled at people who would never know what had happened 20 feet from their coffee. At closing, I found the box still sitting where he left it. I stared at it for a long time and then slid it into my backpack with hands that felt colder than the rain outside. The bus took forever. My shoes soaked through. The city looked like it had been washed clean and put back in the wrong order. In my apartment, the lights hummed. The ceiling leaked in its favorite spot by the window. I set the box on the table and did not open it. I made tea from a bag I had used twice already and held the mug to my face until the steam hid me from myself. I had said no to a man who never heard that word. I had said no to a door most people would sprint through. I lay down on my narrow bed and told myself I had done the right thing. Morning would come. Rent would come with it. The box sat in the dark, patient as a secret. I closed my eyes and listened to the leak tap time into a bowl on the floor. The next day was waiting, already on its way. When morning came, the sunlight didn't feel like a blessing. It felt like a spotlight. I lay on my narrow bed staring at the ceiling, the sound of dripping water from the leaky window filling the room like a metronome, reminding me of everything unfinished in my life. Rent, bills, shifts at the cafe stacked back to back. And then there was last night. The box still sat on my table, small and silent, as if it had a pulse of its own. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't even touched it since setting it down. But its presence filled the room, louder than the fridge humming in the corner, louder than the traffic honking outside. I thought about Ethan, about the way his eyes had searched mine in that flickering hallway, about the quiet in his voice when he said he wanted to choose me. For a second, just a second, I had felt like the world could tilt differently. But I had said no. People would think I was insane. A billionaire, a man who could buy entire city blocks with a casual signature, wanted me, a girl with holes in her shoes and a refrigerator that rattled like it was ready to quit. Girls like me weren't supposed to hesitate when men like him offered a future. But here's the thing. I knew what came with offers like his. I'd grown up watching women in my neighborhood get swept up by promises, men who swore they'd lift them out of poverty, only to lock them into cages they couldn't escape. Sometimes the cages were gold. Sometimes they were just invisible. Either way, freedom disappeared. And freedom was the only thing I truly had. At the cafe that day, the whispers started early. My boss avoided eye contact, as if afraid my choice might be contagious. The girl from the morning shift asked, too casually, "So, did he really propose?" Her smile was sharp, more curiosity than kindness. Customers lingered longer at the counter, pretending to stir their sugar just to sneak glances at me. News had traveled fast. Of course it had. A billionaire asks a nobody to marry him in the back hallway of a cafe? That kind of story doesn't stay quiet. It grows legs, runs down streets, slips into headlines, gets chewed on by strangers who will never know the truth. And the truth was simpler than gossip. I said no because I didn't trust him. Not his money, not his world, not the way his proposal felt like both a promise and a contract. Still, saying no didn't mean my heart was untouched. Every time I wiped down a table or rang up a coffee, I caught myself thinking of his face. The way he hadn't looked angry or shocked when I refused him, only hurt, vulnerable almost. And that image haunted me more than his wealth ever could. By the end of the shift, I was exhausted, not from the work but from carrying the weight of my own choice. When I finally dragged myself home, the box was waiting where I had left it. I sat across from it, chin on my hands, daring myself to open it. I didn't. Instead, I whispered out loud, I said no because I had to. The room didn't argue. The box didn't move. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. Men like Ethan Hale didn't just vanish because you told them no. And something in my bones told me the consequences of that single word were only just beginning to unfold. I went to bed that night certain of one thing. Saying no might have saved me. Or it might have been the biggest mistake of my life. By the third day, my name wasn't just a whisper in the cafe. It was an echo in the whole neighborhood. People I barely knew suddenly had something to say about me, and none of it was kind. She rejected him? Crazy. She must have someone else. Watch, she'll regret it. Everywhere I turned, I caught fragments of conversations that slipped under my skin like splinters. Strangers looked at me with a mix of pity and curiosity, as though I was a walking headline, the poor girl who turned down a billionaire. I tried to ignore it, but ignoring gossip is like trying to ignore rain. You can pretend it isn't there, but it seeps in anyway. Even at the cafe, the atmosphere had changed. My boss, Mr. Carter, barely spoke to me except to bark orders. The other baristas avoided me, whispering behind the milk frother. Customers lingered too long, their eyes flicking from the menu to me, like they expected me to break into a speech about why I'd done it. The worst part was that some of them weren't cruel. They were disappointed. Like I'd ruined a fairy tale ending they wanted to watch unfold. I carried the weight of it home, step by step, up the narrow stairs to my cramped apartment. My landlord was waiting at the door, his arms crossed, his expression firm. "Rent," he said flatly. "You're 2 weeks behind." "I know. I'll have it by Friday," I promised. "You said that last Friday." I swallowed. "Please. Just a few more days." He stared at me, his eyes sharp with suspicion, then finally grunted and walked away. But his footsteps on the stairs sounded like a countdown clock. Inside, I leaned against the door, my chest heavy. My apartment felt smaller than usual, the air thick with tension. I dropped my bag and sat at the table where the box still waited. That cursed box. I hadn't opened it. Not once. But every night, I sat across from it as if it were a second person in the room. I imagined what might be inside. A ring. A contract. A symbol of the life I'd thrown away. The temptation was growing, I won't lie. Because while the world thought I was noble or foolish, I was just tired. Tired of scraping together pennies. Tired of dodging eviction. Tired of watching my dreams shrink smaller each day. Maybe I should have said yes. Maybe I should have taken his hand and let myself be carried into a world where ceilings didn't leak and landlords didn't pound on doors. But then I remembered the look in his eyes when he made the proposal. There had been sincerity, yes, but beneath it, there was power. The kind that doesn't ask, it assumes. And that scared me more than poverty ever could. Still, doubt is a tricky thing. It sneaks in late at night when the city goes quiet. It whispers that maybe you made the wrong choice. That night, I dreamed of Ethan again. Not the billionaire on magazine covers, but the man standing in that flickering hallway, offering me something impossible. I woke with my heart racing and my hands clenched around the blanket like I was holding on for dear life. By morning, the city had already decided who I was, the foolish girl who had turned down a billionaire. And no matter how hard I tried to drown it out, that label clung to me like smoke. What I didn't know then was that the real storm hadn't even started. The whispers, the stares, the disappointment, they were just the beginning. The true fallout was waiting for me in an envelope I hadn't seen yet. The morning after another long shift at the cafe, I climbed the narrow staircase to my apartment with heavy steps. My shoes were damp from puddles, my uniform smelled faintly of coffee and grease, and all I wanted was to collapse into bed. But the second I reached my door, I froze. There was a folded piece of paper wedged under the frame. My landlord's handwriting was scrawled across it in thick, impatient ink. Final notice. My stomach dropped. I tore it open right there in the hallway. The words blurred as I read them, but the meaning was crystal clear. I had until the end of the week to pay everything I owed or I'd be out. No more extensions, no more promises. Inside, the apartment felt colder than usual. The ceiling still leaked in its favorite corner, dripping into the tin bowl I'd set out weeks ago. The fridge hummed, half empty except for eggs and milk close to their expiration dates. The air smelled faintly of damp walls and old tea leaves. I looked around at the life I'd pieced together with second-hand furniture and thrift store curtains. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The thought of losing it twisted something deep inside me. I sank into the rickety chair at the table, and my eyes landed on the black box. Still unopened. Still sitting where I'd left it after Ethan had walked out of the cafe. 4 days, I'd resisted it. But now, with eviction staring me in the face, the temptation gnawed harder. Maybe if I opened it, I'd find an answer. A way out. Maybe his promise wasn't just words. But no, I couldn't. If I opened it, it would mean I was already halfway to saying yes. And I had said no for a reason. I dropped my head into my hands, pressing my palms against my eyes until stars flashed. My mind played cruel games. Images of Ethan's mansion, his world of endless light and polished glass, contrasted with my cracked ceiling and peeling wallpaper. A knock jolted me upright. I opened the door to find my neighbor, Mrs. Doyle, holding out a bag of bread rolls. She was in her 70s, hair pinned in a messy bun, cardigan buttoned wrong. "You look thin," she said. "Take these." I tried to smile. "You need them more than I do." "Nonsense." She shoved the bag into my hands. "You're young. You'll figure it out." When she left, I stared at the bread, my throat tight. Her kindness felt heavier than the landlord's threat. Later that night, I crawled into bed and listened to the city beyond my window. Car horns, sirens, laughter spilling from bars. Life kept moving while I sat in the dark, wondering if my no to Ethan was brave or just foolish. As sleep tugged at me, I couldn't shake the image of him. His voice, low and certain, saying he wanted to choose me. His eyes, steady and unflinching, even when I turned him down. I whispered into the quiet, "Why did you ask me, of all people?" No answer came, only the steady drip from the ceiling bowl. What I didn't know was that the answer would arrive the very next morning, sealed in an envelope with my name written on it. An envelope that would drag me into a world I never thought I'd step inside. A world where the words poor girl and billionaire would collide again, in the most impossible way. The next morning began like every other, weak sunlight slipping through the thin curtains, the smell of damp from the leaky wall, the ache of exhaustion in my bones. I brewed cheap coffee in the dented pot and sat staring at the black box still perched on the table. It was like it was daring me, whispering that I had made a mistake. A sharp knock pulled me from my thoughts. My heart jumped, thinking it might be the landlord coming early to collect what I didn't have. But when I opened the door, it wasn't him. A man in a crisp gray suit stood there, holding a leather briefcase. He was the type of person you could smell money on before he even spoke. He glanced at a paper in his hand, then at me. "Miss Raya?" he asked, his voice clipped and professional. "Yes," I said cautiously. He handed me a thick envelope sealed with wax. "From Hale and Associates. You're requested to be at the address listed inside at noon today." Before I could ask anything, he gave a stiff nod, turned, and disappeared down the stairs, his polished shoes clicking against the worn wood. I closed the door, pulse racing. Hale and Associates. Ethan's lawyers. My fingers shook as I broke the seal and slid out the papers. The first page was simple, typed in perfect legal font. "You are hereby summoned to attend a private matter regarding the estate of Mr. Ethan Hale. Address, 412 Crescent Lane." I read it 3 times, each word heavier than the last. 412 Crescent Lane wasn't just an address. It was the address, Ethan's mansion, the sprawling estate you saw on magazine covers, with gates taller than most houses and windows that glittered like diamonds at night. Why me? Why would his lawyers be calling me? I stuffed the papers back into the envelope and pressed it against my chest, my breath shallow. My first thought was that this was a mistake. Maybe they had the wrong person. Maybe my name had been confused with someone else's. But deep down, another thought grew louder. Ethan hadn't accepted my no. He had left something unfinished, and this, whatever it was part of it. The hours crawled until noon. I dressed in my cleanest clothes, though they were still faded and thin at the elbows. On the bus ride across town, people jostled and muttered, the smell of sweat and fried food filling the air. All I could think about was how far Crescent Lane was from my world. When the bus finally dropped me near the gated entrance, I froze. The mansion loomed beyond, sprawling and immaculate. A long driveway wound through manicured lawns and fountains that sparkled in the midday sun. It looked like something out of a dream, or maybe a nightmare. 2 guards in black suits stood by the gate. When I showed them the letter, they waved me through without a word. My shoes crunched against gravel as I walked the endless path toward the front doors. Each step felt heavier, as though I was walking not just into his house, but into something I wouldn't be able to step out of so easily. The doors opened before I could knock. A woman in a tailored dress, one of the lawyers, greeted me with a polite but unreadable smile. She led me through glittering halls, past chandeliers and marble floors, until we stopped in a vast study lined with books and glass. "Please wait here," she said, placing a folder on the desk before me. "Mr. Hale's instructions will be explained shortly." The doors closed, leaving me alone. The silence in that mansion was unlike anything I'd known. It wasn't the silence of an empty apartment or a tired cafe at night. It was thick, watchful, like the walls themselves were listening. My hands hovered over the folder, heart hammering. I wasn't sure if I wanted to know what was inside, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever it was, my life was about to change, and I wasn't sure if I was ready. I sat staring at the folder on the desk like it might explode if I touched it. The room around me was suffocating in its luxury. High ceilings with painted beams, shelves full of leather-bound books no one had opened in years, and a massive window that framed the city skyline like a trophy. Everything here screamed of Ethan Hale. His world. His power. His distance from mine. Finally, I reached out and opened the folder. My breath caught. The first page was a transfer document. His signature, sharp, unmistakable, stared back at me from the bottom line. I skimmed the words, my pulse pounding louder with every sentence. The deed to this mansion, this billion-dollar estate, had been signed over. To me. For a second, I thought it was a prank, some cruel test. I shut the folder, opened it again, as if the words might rearrange into something sane. They didn't. The door clicked open and the woman in the tailored dress returned, her heels tapping softly on the marble. She glanced at me, then at the papers I'd been holding. "You've seen it," she said matter-of-factly. Mr. Hale's instructions were clear. The property, along with certain assets listed in the appendix, is now yours. I blinked at her. "What do you mean, it's mine? Why me? This has to be some mistake." "There is no mistake," she interrupted gently. He was very precise. His instructions were left before he departed the country on urgent business. He made it clear this was not to be delayed. "Departed the country?" I repeated. She nodded. No timeline for his return was given, only that you would be contacted. That has now been fulfilled. Her words rattled around my head, refusing to land. Ethan had left the country, and before leaving, he'd handed me his mansion. Just like that. I laughed once, a shaky sound that broke in my throat. "This is insane. He barely knows me." The lawyer's expression softened, but her tone stayed professional. "Miss Raya, what you do with the property is your decision. Keep it. Sell it. Leave it. But the papers are binding. Legally, this house belongs to you now." I looked down at my hands, still gripping the folder as if it might vanish if I let go. I thought of my apartment with its cracked walls and final notice pinned to the door. I thought of my boss, rolling his eyes every time I begged for an extra shift. And then I thought of Ethan, standing in that flickering hallway, asking me to marry him as though I was the only person in the world who mattered. I didn't understand any of this, but one truth rang louder than the questions. Overnight, I had gone from nearly homeless to owning a mansion worth more than I could imagine. The lawyer slid a heavy set of keys across the desk. They clinked against the polished wood, sharp and final. "Congratulations, Miss Raya," she said quietly. "This house is yours." I stared at the keys, my reflection caught in their shine. Somewhere deep in my chest, a storm was rising. Because whatever Ethan's reason was for giving me all this, it wasn't kindness. It was something else. Something I hadn't uncovered yet. The first night I stayed in the mansion, I felt like an intruder in someone else's dream. The halls were endless, lined with mirrors that caught my reflection in ways I wasn't used to. My secondhand jeans, my scuffed shoes, my uncertain posture. Chandeliers glittered overhead like frozen stars, and the marble floors echoed my footsteps back at me, reminding me with every step that I didn't belong. I wandered from room to room, trying to take it in. A ballroom with polished floors that had never seen my kind of dancing. A dining table so long it looked like it could seat an army. Bedrooms filled with silk sheets and wardrobes bigger than my entire apartment. The kitchen was gleaming steel and granite, stocked with more food than I'd ever had at once in my life. But it wasn't just the grandeur that unsettled me, it was the presence of Ethan everywhere. His world lingered in every corner. A jacket left draped on a chair. A half-finished glass of scotch on the bar cart. A book lying open on a leather armchair, as if he'd set it down mid-sentence and would be back any moment to finish it. I told myself it was mine now. My name was on the deed. My keys opened the doors. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was trespassing in a place that didn't want me. That night, I lay in the master bedroom, the silk sheets cool against my skin, staring at the high ceiling painted with clouds and gold trim. The bed could have swallowed me whole. I should have felt victorious, secure, relieved. Instead, I felt like I'd stepped into a trap. The next morning, the staff arrived. I hadn't even known there would be staff, but apparently the mansion ran on schedules and routines that didn't stop just because ownership had changed. Maids, gardeners, a chef. They all arrived at their usual hours, confused but respectful when I told them I was now the owner. Their polite smiles hid questions I wasn't ready to answer. "Where is Mr. Hale?" one of them asked softly. "Out of the country," I replied, though the words felt strange in my mouth. He didn't say when he'd be back. Every day, I tried to settle in, but the mansion didn't feel like home. It felt like a museum of someone else's life, and I was the unwanted tour guide. Yet at the same time, there was a pull I couldn't ignore. A part of me that felt alive walking those halls, as if the mansion itself was daring me to claim it. And in small, secret ways, I began to. I cooked breakfast in the massive kitchen, even when the chef offered. I curled up in the study and read from books I could never have afforded. I stood on the balcony overlooking the city, the skyline glittering below me, and let myself wonder what it would feel like to truly belong here. But even as I tried, I couldn't shake Ethan's shadow. His presence was everywhere. In the scent of his cologne that still lingered in the closets. In the photos tucked in frames on the walls. Him shaking hands with world leaders. Him smiling beside cars that cost more than my building. And sometimes, late at night, I swore I could hear footsteps in the halls that weren't mine. I knew one thing for certain. Owning his mansion didn't mean I had left him behind. If anything, it meant I had stepped deeper into his world. And his world had secrets. I could feel them in the walls, waiting for me to uncover them. Days slipped into nights, and the mansion never stopped whispering. It wasn't the kind of house you could ignore. It demanded to be noticed. Every time I thought I'd explored all of it, I stumbled onto another hallway, another staircase, another door. Some rooms were ordinary enough. Guest bedrooms with untouched sheets, offices with neatly stacked files, closets full of suits pressed to perfection. But others felt different, like they were hiding something. One evening, I was wandering the east wing when I noticed a door that didn't match the others. While most were carved with elegant woodwork, this one was plain, almost out of place. The knob was locked. I tried it twice, pressing harder the second time, but it didn't budge. Something about that door gnawed at me. Why would a man with everything keep one door so deliberately shut? I started searching. Drawers in his study, the safe hidden behind a painting, the desk where his signature sprawled across contracts worth more than I'd earn in 10 lifetimes. That's when I found the first clue, a photograph tucked inside a folder. It was Ethan, years younger, smiling beside a woman I didn't recognize. She was beautiful, yes, but not in the polished, magazine cover way. Her eyes were alive, mischievous, and in her arms, a little boy, no older than 3. Ethan's arm wrapped around them both like they were his entire world. My hands trembled as I held it. Ethan never mentioned a wife or a child. Why was this hidden in a folder at the back of a drawer? The next discovery came a day later. In the library, I pulled a book from the shelf and a small key clattered to the floor. My pulse quickened as I picked it up. It was old, brass, worn from use, too small for the mansion's main doors. I already knew where it belonged. That night, when the staff had gone and silence blanketed the house, I crept back to the locked door in the east wing. My fingers shook as I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a reluctant click. The door opened to darkness. I stepped inside, flicking the switch on the wall. The room was nothing like the others. No chandeliers, no polished floors, just bare walls, shelves stacked with files, and boxes piled high. A private archive. I pulled one box open. Inside were documents, business papers, contracts, letters, and scattered among them, more photographs. The same woman, the same child, and in some of the letters, her name, Elena. Piece by piece, a picture formed. Ethan had loved her. He'd had a family once, and for some reason, it had been erased from the perfect image the world saw of him. Why hide them? Why leave me his mansion, but not his truth? I gathered the photographs back into the box, my heart racing. Something wasn't right. Ethan hadn't just left the country. He'd left behind ghosts he clearly didn't want anyone to see. And now, somehow, they belonged to me. As I shut the door and locked it again, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't just about a proposal or an inheritance. I was standing in the middle of a story Ethan Hale hadn't finished telling. And sooner or later, he'd come back to finish it. I didn't sleep the night I found the photographs. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's arm around that woman, the little boy's innocent smile, the word Elena written across faded letters. Questions kept circling in my head, sharp and relentless. Had he loved her the way he claimed he wanted to love me? What had happened to them? And why hide it all in a locked room no one was supposed to enter? By dawn, I felt like an imposter in his mansion more than ever. The marble floors, the glittering chandeliers, the endless halls, they weren't mine. They were still his. And now, they carried secrets that pressed down on me like weights. I was in the study late that afternoon, staring out at the gardens below, when I felt it. A shift in the air, a presence behind me. My breath caught. Slowly, I turned. Ethan Hale stood in the doorway. He was exactly as I remembered, and yet sharper, like time away had carved him into something even more commanding. His suit was dark, perfectly tailored, but it was his eyes that pinned me in place. Steady, unreadable. My voice caught in my throat. "You're back." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with deliberate calm. "Were you expecting me?" I gripped the edge of the desk, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "I wasn't sure if you ever planned on returning." His mouth curved, not quite a smile. "I wanted to see something first." He moved closer, his footsteps echoing in the silence. "I wanted to see if you'd still walk away when you had everything." My chest tightened. Is that what this was? Some kind of test? His eyes flicked to the folder still on the desk, the one with his signature transferring the mansion into my name. "You said no to me," he said evenly. "No one says no to me. Not in business, not in life. I had to know if your no was real, or if it would crumble when faced with the temptation of my world." I swallowed hard. "And what did you find out?" He stopped just a breath away, his gaze holding mine. "That you're still here. The words hung between us, heavy and electric. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I wanted to ask about Elena, about the child in the photos, about the locked room that had shattered whatever image I thought I had of him. But the questions tangled on my tongue. Because standing this close to him again, I realized something terrifying. Despite the secrets, despite the betrayal I felt when I uncovered what he'd hidden, my body still remembered the way it felt when his eyes were only on me. Ethan tilted his head, his voice dropping lower. "Tell me, Raya, did you keep the mansion because of what it meant, or because of what it meant about me?" I opened my mouth to answer, but no sound came, because in that moment, I didn't know the truth myself. All I knew was that Ethan Hale was back, and whatever game he'd started between us was far from over. The silence in the study was thick, the kind that made every breath sound too loud. Ethan's eyes were locked on mine, steady, relentless, as if he was peeling away every excuse I might give. "You could have sold this place," he said, his voice quiet but cutting. "You could have walked away the second my lawyers handed you the deed. But you didn't. You stayed. Why?" My grip tightened on the desk edge. I wanted to tell him the truth. That part of me had been too stunned, too desperate to believe it wasn't some kind of cruel mistake. That another part of me had been drawn in, curious about the man who claimed to choose me and yet carried shadows I couldn't ignore. But saying those things out loud felt like handing him my heart on a silver platter. So instead, I whispered, maybe I stayed because I wanted answers. His gaze sharpened. "Answers about me? Or about yourself?" The question cut deeper than I expected. Because it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about me, about the girl who had spent her life saying no to things she thought would cage her, only to end up standing inside the most gilded cage of all. "I found the room," I said suddenly, the words spilling before I could stop them. "The locked one. I know about Elena. I know about the child. I know you had a life before me, a life you've hidden." For the first time since he walked in, Ethan's expression faltered. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkened, but he didn't look away. "That's why you gave me this mansion, isn't it?" I pressed on. "Not as a gift, not as a test, but because you didn't want to face your own ghosts." He exhaled, slow, heavy, as if the weight of years sat in his chest. "Elena was the only woman I ever thought I'd love," he admitted. "She left. Took my son with her. Said my world was poison, that no amount of money could make me the man she needed. And she was right. At least then." His eyes flicked to me, sharp with something I couldn't name. "But when I met you, Raya, I saw something I hadn't felt in years. A chance, not to fix the past, but to build something different." My heart twisted. His words were raw, almost fragile, but they scared me. Because love built on ruins wasn't simple. It demanded choices, sacrifices, risks. "So what now?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You walk back into your mansion, back into my life, and expect me to just forget the lies? Forget that you tested me? Forget that you're still the man who can crush anyone who tells you no?" Ethan stepped closer, closing the space between us until I could feel his breath against my skin. His voice was low, steady, dangerous in its honesty. "No," he said. "I don't want you to forget. I want you to decide. Do you want to keep saying no to me? Or do you want to say yes, and see what happens when you stop running?" The air trembled between us. My chest rose and fell too fast, my mind torn in two. He was offering me everything, his world, his heart, his broken past wrapped in promises of a future. But he was also asking me to risk the one thing I'd fought for my whole life, my freedom. I closed my eyes for a moment, listening to the echo of my own pulse. And when I opened them, he was still there, waiting, his gaze steady, his hand hovering as if he'd catch me if I fell. It wasn't about the mansion. It wasn't about his billions. It wasn't even about Elena or the ghosts locked away in his past. It was about me. About whether I was willing to gamble everything I was on a man who had the power to break me, or to love me in a way no one ever had. And standing there, in the middle of his world and mine colliding, I realized the truth. The real choice wasn't his anymore. It was mine. People still whisper about me. The poor girl who rejected a billionaire, only to end up in his mansion. Some call it luck. Some call it madness. They all think they know the story, but none of them were there the night he walked back through those doors, demanding an answer only I could give. The truth is, my life didn't turn into a fairy tale overnight. Love doesn't work that way. The mansion is still full of shadows. His past with Elena, the son he barely speaks of, the locked boxes of secrets that may never fully open. And me, I'm still learning how to breathe in rooms built for people like him, not people like me. But there's something I can't deny. The girl who used to fall asleep to the sound of water dripping into a tin bowl is gone. I'm still me, but I'm not the same. Because now, I know what it feels like to have a choice, to stand in front of a man who could own the world and tell him no, or yes, on my own terms. Ethan doesn't ask me to change. He doesn't promise perfection. He only offers himself, flawed and powerful, with eyes that still search mine like I'm the one quiet place he can finally rest. And maybe that's why I stay. Not for the chandeliers or the silk sheets, not for the money or the name. I stay because when he looks at me, I'm not a project, or a possession, or a mistake. I'm his choice, and he, somehow, is mine. The world will keep talking, spinning its gossip and headlines, but I don't care anymore. Because behind these walls, behind the gates and the gold, it's not about the mansion. It's about us. And our story is only just beginning.